Hello, and welcome to my first episode of Foster's Features Presents All Them Angels. My guest today played Nurse Maureen Morahan on the classic BBC series Angels for the first 3 seasons, and she's here today to give us the scoop of her time on the show. Please join me in welcoming the one, the only, the multi-talented Miss Érin Geraghty. Hey, Érin, how you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you for that lovely intro. Very kind.
All right, so let's talk about it. Before we discuss Angels, could you give me like a brief rundown of your career before Angels? Because if I remember correctly, you went to theater school first, right?
I did. I mean, it all happened by accident. I very much wanted to be a ballet dancer. And I was doing Saturday morning ballet at a little school nearby. And one Saturday morning, some people came and watched the class and picked out some children to dance in a film. And I was one of them. And that was a film called Star, with Julie Andrews playing the lead. And I was just one in a class, there's a ballet class, and I was one of the little girls doing the dance. And it was after that the ballet school that I was doing Saturday morning ballet at, they had an agency and they thought, oh, she's very small for her age, which I was, and quite bright. Let's send her for some acting work. And I was incredibly shy. And they sent me for an acting part, and I was bright and I read well. And in those days, you had to be 12 to get a license to work in television. So although I was 12, I actually looked about 8 or 9 because I was very tiny. And so I got this television part, and that was a television play. And then it happened again and again. And I started to quite like it. And soon I was doing quite a lot of things. And it sort of grew from there, really, and overtook my love for ballet. And then after a while, because I was at convent grammar school and the nuns did not like me taking time out to work, understandably. You know, it was a very academically strict school, and we'd had to pass an entrance exam as well as the government exam to get in. So I'm sort of flitting off to do bits of filming. They were very, very angry about it. And I pleaded with my mother and father to say, can I go full time to the theatre school, stage school as it was called here? And they let me. And I worked and I went to school and I carried on working, which paid my fees. And I had a wonderful, wonderful time. I did a lot of television. I did a film, The Tales of Beatrix Potter, with the Royal Ballet. And I was presented to the Queen and other members of the royal family. I was in London's Royal Court Theatre. I was in the London's West End. I was having a fantastic time, and all that time learning on the job and growing and still at school, and learning more about my dance and my dialects and stage falls and fighting and all of those things, and it was a fantastic time. I really was very, very lucky, very lucky.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And it sounds like you really enjoyed acting too. And as you said, it was like, by mistake and stuff. But did you ever go back to ballet at any time? Like, were you ever able to, pursue dancing on the side at any point, or did it help you at all in your career?
I carried on dancing, but just before I went to the dancing school full time, the stage school full time, I'd auditioned for London's very famous Royal Ballet School. And I got through the dancing exam. And then when they do a medical exam, if you've ever seen the film Billy Elliot, he auditions and they do this exam, they look down your spine. And they looked down your spine and they said there was a problem with my spine. And so said no. And of course, I had no problems with my spine. So my mother's thinking, what's going on here? Anyway, a few years later, when I was doing point work with ballet, I was getting pains in my knees. And that was traced back to my spine. And I do have a very slight curvature, which is not a problem in everyday life. But for the ballerina, hard work, it was not going to happen. So, that put paid to that. But I did carry on dancing. I've danced in lots of jobs, not in a musical theatre type of dancing type of way, but playing a character who dances, and even in the last sort of 10 years, I've been blessed to be able to dance in things. So that's been great fun as well.
Now, when you were in theater school, traditionally, from what I understand, in theater school, there's like 3 separate types of, arts that theater school offers. And usually it's drama, singing, and dance, I think. When you were in theater school originally, like when you entered in for acting, was it required that you had to dabble in like singing or dancing on the side to make sure you had as much of the craft and to trade as much as you could?
In the stage school element, which is, you know, when you're still doing academic work as well, we would do academic classes in the mornings. And then in the afternoon, we all did the same. We all had to do ballet, we all had to do tap, we all had to do contemporary. We all had to do acting and sight reading and makeup and stage fighting and falls. And we all had to do mime. I'm sure I've probably missed things out. And we all did productions. Yes, so we all did everything. And, you know, some were very good at all three, were triple threat. Some were better at one than the other. And some were sort of somewhere in the middle, you know. And I was strong on acting, strong on dance, but singing I was always terrified of, just terrified of. But, you know, I got away. I managed, you know, yeah.
Are you musical at all, though? I mean, can you sing, carry a tune?
I can sing, carry a tune. Do I like to do it publicly? No, but I've had to on occasions. I live in a very competitive, very musical family. All my older siblings were all sang beautifully, and I was the youngest of 7. And it was a bit, oh, don't you sing, you can't type of thing. And then I married my husband, who's very musical, and all my 5 children have sung professionally. So if there's anything on the television, like a singing competition, like, you know, Idol, you know, whatever they are, pop star type things, they will notice if somebody is just tiny bit off the note. So immediately I go, and not that they would ever criticize me, but you know, it's not my forte, and that's fine.
All right. So after a period of time, you know, you did movies, you dabbled in theater, and then all of a sudden in 1974, 75, the opportunity for Angels came about. Do you remember what the auditioning proceedings were like, and like how you heard about it, how you went up for it?
Yes, I mean, I'd worked with the producer before on a thing called Z-Cars, which was a police series, which was supposed to be the first hardcore police series. It was supposed to be much more like real life than previous TV police series had been. And I'd done a bit of work in that, playing somebody from Liverpool using a Liverpudlian accent, talking like that. If you've ever seen Shirley Valentine,
Yes.
or Reggie Rita. So I'd worked for this producer using that accent. And he was trying to find a young Irish actress and had forgotten that I am Irish. And somebody said to him, well, what about Érin Geraghty? He said, oh, yes, of course. So I went and auditioned, and it was in those days, you would go, you wouldn't be sent the script beforehand. You would go, they'd give you a script, you'd look at it, and then you'd read it with the producer, or maybe there might be a director. There wouldn't be any filming of it or any self-taping or anything like that in those days for TV, or chemistry tests. And, you know, I went and met him and I read the script, and he said, lovely, nice to see you. And off I went. And then I got called to do a recall. So I went back, and there were a couple of the directors there. One was Julia Smith, who then went on to start up EastEnders. And I can't remember who else was there. It might have been Paula Milne, who originated it, the writer, who went on to do amazing things. Could well have been. She created the whole thing. Could well have been Paula, I can't remember. I read again and then went away again. Thank you, lovely to see you. And then I remember, you know, we didn't have mobile phones or even pagers. So the thing was, if you weren't at home between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the day on Monday to Friday, you had to phone your agent from a phone box. And I was away. I was rehearsing something else. Can't remember what. And I realized I needed to phone my agent. So I phoned them, and they said, yes, you've got the part in Angels. And I was thrilled. But and then at that point, I knew it was a regular part in a nursing series. That is all I knew. I knew nothing more. And then we were called, and I'd be interested to know if the other Angels memories match up, actually. Then we were called to Ron Craddock, the producer's office in the BBC. And we got there, and there were 6 chairs, and on each chair was a pile of paperwork, A4 paperwork, that big. Some of them were scripts, about 16 of them, I think, in the first series, 16 scripts, and a couple of them like they're about background and about hospital procedures.
Wow.
And that was, you know, I went in and I met the other girls. One, Karen David, had actually been at stage school with me. I'd known her since I was 12, 13. So that was lovely. And the other girls were there. Up until that point, I certainly, and I don't think they did, realize that it was about us, that we were the leads. that we weren't just regulars like in, say, emergency ward 10, that was it, and other hospital series like General Hospital, when you've got a huge cast of characters that come in and out. It was very much a series about us six. And, you know, that was the point we knew. And I remember going home on the tube with this huge pile of paperwork. I mean, it was heavy stuff. And, you know, it was, you know, when I think about it, I don't think it was as intimidating, because I don't think we were really aware of what it was going to be at that point. It was just, we were lucky to get these parts and it was exciting. And, you know, and there was all the stuff about learning about nursing, and we all went and did some practical work and et cetera, et cetera. But up until, you know, we really got on and doing and it started to go out and proved to be so popular, I don't think we really knew how it would turn out. And that's probably good, because it kept us grounded.
Yeah, because I talked to Julie about this actually, and there was so much anticipation of this series, because I think the individual who you mentioned earlier about who was the writer for Z-Cars, his goal with this series was to do for nursing what Z-Cars did for the law enforcement profession.
Yes. They jokingly called us Z-beds as opposed to Z-Cars.
Oh gosh.
That was only an in-joke in the BBC, Z-beds, because, you know, but you're absolutely right. That was Ron Craddock's aim, and Paula Milne, the writer. That was their aim, to take it away from the softly, sweet tucking in the beds, although we did a fair amount of bed making and bed changing. And much more about real issues and real people. And certainly for those first 3 seasons, it was very much about the hospital and the procedures and the process we were going through, than about who we were dating or that sort of thing. You know, quite often, I know it went on to be much more soapy later on when it went twice weekly. But at that point, it was, you know, much more sort of drama documentary style, although it was scripted, and there was no messing about. You know, our aim was to do things as correctly as we could, you know, and I think that was right, and I think it proved its point. Of course there were mistakes, of course there were, you know, but, you know, I think it did a good job of doing what it set out to do.
Yes. And also another thing too about it was, in addition to making the nursing profession, giving it a more accurate portrayal, there was also, you know, earlier, like you said, you guys didn't know that it was about, you know, the 6 of you, and it was going to be focused on the 6 of you. That was, I think, very ahead of its time, because I don't think there were, before Angels, there was a lot of representation of young women who wanted to go into the nursing profession, and what their backstories were and their reasoning behind it, what their vocations were. And it just really set the bar very high, I think, for themes of feminism, female empowerment, and like women supporting women. And, you know, this was in a time where we were in a very big wave, I think, for feminist right movements.
Yes, absolutely. And Paula Milne and a lot of the writers, one of them, Adele Rose, sadly passed away last week. You know, there were a lot of very strong female writers. They weren't all purely female writers, but we had strong female directors and writers. And, you know, it was a wonderful experience. It really was. It taught me a huge amount.
When you were auditioning, I mean, was it always like, you know, set in stone for you to be Maureen, or did you ever read for like other parts as well?
No, because I'm Irish, it was Maureen. It was always Maureen, yes.
And it was always in the script that she was Irish? That
Oh yes, absolutely. Always was as appeared. Yes.
Where are you from, dear?
Sarah Regan from Clapham Common.
Oh, that's much nearer home. And you?
Ballinasloe.
And, you know, for at least the first 2 or 3 seasons, you were the only Irish character on the show. Did you feel that like there was some added responsibility that you were representing like your native homeland or your ancestral roots or whatnot with the Irish?
I don't think I did really. I mean, I remember there was one point, really weirdly, sometime maybe in the end of the second or sometime in the third, where somebody suggested maybe I should drop the accent. And I was quite adamant about no, that wasn't happening. My father had been in the UK for many, many decades, and his Galway accent was still strong, and I didn't want to do that. And I don't know why that happened or where that came from. But no, I mean, I think not so much, as an actor, it wasn't so much for me about representing my country, although of course I was, and very proud to do so, hugely proud, but also more importantly was to be true to Maureen and where she came from and what was her truth of her character and her background, and I was raised in an Irish Roman Catholic family, so I knew a lot about that, especially in terms of, sort of worldly things.
Yeah, and I definitely see a lot of those Irish Roman Catholic values instilled in Maureen, because I actually too had a very similar Irish Catholic upbringing. And what I think is awesome about your character is that she is portrayed as being able to take care of herself. She's very strong-minded and she's opinionated, but she's not, abrasive, but she is very tender-hearted and she has a strong loyalty to those who she loves. But at the same time, she's very independent and she knows how to, she knows what she wants. Would you find that
She's also
accurate?
was very narrow-minded as well.
You said I told you.
What they're like.
They?
Addicts.
There are no theys in this hospital, nurse, only people. We put no one under a heading. Kindly remember that.
Some people can do it. Grow old with dignity. Look back on their lives with pride. A sense of accomplishment. The others, those that have accomplished nothing, they seem to take it out on the rest of us. They're the takers.
Maybe they've been unlucky.
Oh, I'm sure luck has nothing to do with it.
No?
Self-help can overcome bad luck. It can turn disadvantage to advantage.
And you'd know all about that, wouldn't you?
Pardon?
After 1 year in London, you're suddenly an expert on the human condition. It's remarkable.
What's that supposed to mean?
It means, Maureen, that if you're not careful, you're in danger of turning into a bigot.
It's assuming, of course, it hasn't already happened.
What does she mean, a bigot?
Look it up in a dictionary.
I think that, there were quite a few times when other behaviours, especially with Patricia, Fiona's character, that Maureen found really difficult, because they were so alien to what her beliefs were, really were. And I think she found it very difficult that Fiona's character, that Patricia again was like, maybe I'll go into something else. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I need new shoes, type of thing. Which was, as far as Maureen was concerned, it was, I always wanted to be a nurse. I'm going to be a nurse.
So how many times do you give up and run? Because I chuck teaching. You must want to get somewhere, Pat.
You'd really stay on another 4 or 5 years?
Just to be nearer 6. 3 years to get me SRN. That's if I pass first time. Then my midwifery. Then a couple of years as staff nurse before I can do my health visitors training. And that's another year.
Ye gods. You're not serious.
Why shouldn't I be?
Well, in the first place, you only got the idea yesterday.
I think it's what's right for me. Of course, I'll have to talk it over with Mammy in the holidays. It's only fair to prepare her. She'll understand.
And that's the second reason. You were going potty when you first came here at the thought of leaving your family for only 3 years. Couldn't you do the course at home?
There's only one college in Belfast. I'd have to be very lucky to get a place. Most Irish girls wanting to do health visiting come over here.
But love, I mean, how can you?
How can I what?
Commit yourself.
Isn't that what life's all about? One way or another.
But Maureen, you're only 18. How can you possibly know what you want to do in another 3 years' time? How can you be so certain?
Sure, and they asked me the very same thing when I was 7 years old. When I told them I was going to be a nurse.
And this is the way to do it. So, I think I know there were various episodes where different things happened, where her eyes started to open. It would have been interesting to see later on, what would have happened to her historically over the years, as she changed and developed as a nurse and as a woman.
And, you mentioned this before earlier also, that you and all the other cast members had to have some sort of medical or nursing training prior to going onto the show to make your performances as authentic as possible. What sort of things did you have to do exactly? Like, do you remember?
I remember going and helping with basic things like sort of observing rather than actually doing things. There was quite a lot of shadowing people rather than being allowed to do things for a while. I remember going to hospitals and sort of following ward rounds and, you know, watching beds be made. I'm sure they don't do them, but in those days, the way beds had to be made was so strict. And I remember we had a medical advisor, you know, you had to make the beds, you know, I can do a hospital corner, you know, and pillow slips in those way, the opening had to be away from the door. So when the consultant, who was God, came into the ward, and they were all those long Nightingale type wards, that, you know, there would be no untidy edges of pillows showing through the pillow slips. It would all be neat. You know, it was all very strict like that. So we all had to be able to learn. Of course, we were student nurses. And for me, starting as a first time student nurse, rather than, I think Shirley Brent was the second or third year at the beginning. Fiona and I were first, along with Karen David. I think she was first, I'm trying to remember. But some of the others were maybe the next year up. So we had to, you know, we were learning on the job, but we did have to learn how to do it and do it properly. And there was an episode later on where it was in maternity. And I remember we had something like 10 or 12 babies all under sort of 3 weeks old. And I did actually go into a maternity unit, and they taught me how to bath a baby the way that nurses do it. Now, I'm obviously from a large Irish family, so I had bathed babies, my nieces and nephews, but at that point I didn't have any babies of my own. And they taught me how to hold the baby in a way that stops the baby from slipping but is safe. And you know, I've used that with both with my children and with my grandchildren. I've taught all my daughters, my 3 daughters, how to do that, to hold their baby in this particular way that keeps the baby safe. I mean, there are all these special safety things for babies in baby baths now, but you know, in those days, you know, I'm a washing up basin or you know, the tin bath or the sink or whatever, you know, you didn't necessarily have a specific baby bath. A lot of families wouldn't have. So, you know, so I learned to do it. But I remember also on that episode, at one point, I'm bathing this baby, and all the actor mums are sitting around. And there I am, 21, 22 maybe, with this baby in this water. And I get a director's message from the gallery down to the floor assistant saying, can I get the baby's head to look more into camera?
Oh, gosh.
This is a 2-week-old baby.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Mm-mm.
Don't think that's going to happen. So, you know, sometimes, you know, there were things you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. You know.
And you have to be careful too, because I mean, I don't know if they had them back then, but today there are labor laws actually for child actors.
Oh yes,
and
there always have been. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, there are, and there were then. I don't know how tight they are now, if they're tighter now than they were then, but that's why we had so many babies, because they couldn't be on set. And quite often you see twins and triplets nowadays playing, you know, one part. Yes. I'm a mother of triplets, so you know, there was often a thought, would I put my 3 through that? But it didn't happen. They did commercials and things, they did films, they did enough, yeah.
But they didn't go into quite the same field to the extent that you did.
No, they saw it for what it is. One of them is a musician, and one of them's a graphic designer, but the others are all in more sensible jobs.
And how much do you feel like you were like your character, Maureen? I mean, did you see any parallels between the two of you?
Only from the fact that we were from strong Irish Catholic families. I think by the time I got to play Maureen, I'd already been acting professionally for about 8 or 9 years. I'd been filming on location with people like The Who, you know, on things like That'll Be the Day, where, you know, Keith Moon and other members were doing all sorts of things on location that, you know, Maureen would certainly not have got over easily. You know, I'd seen quite a lot in the business by then and played quite a lot of characters. So I think I was a little bit more street savvy than her. I think I always was, to be honest. I think I always was, but certainly, yes. But I knew her from, you know, from seeing my cousins and that. I knew innately, you know, her and her beliefs and her strengths. You know, I totally felt those, because I felt the same about those important things, those fundamental things like doing good, doing the right thing, being honest, you know, those sort of things, being kind, you know, and being, you know, very strongly tied to your family and your background. You know, those were absolutely mirrored. But in terms of other behaviors, no.
Did your time on the show ever give you like the the desire or want to maybe go into the nursing field at all?
No, don't be ridiculous. I have huge respect, never more so than at this time, for anyone on the front line. And I mean that sincerely, I really do. I've seen a lot of hospitals from a patient and patient relative side, and I have huge admiration. That is a true vocation.
It is.
And whenever I'm on a show and things are going tough and we haven't rehearsed enough, or the tech is going wrong, or an actor's forgetting their lines, I just remember at the end of the day, nobody dies. And that's the reality, and that's the difference. I'm not saying what we do isn't important. It has a place. And I have friends who are medical professionals who say that they need us to help them to deal with what they deal with. But I always feel a bit of a fraud compared to that. But no, I mean, it's never. I did as a child very seriously think at one point about becoming a doctor. And I think for quite a while, my mother thought maybe I should have done that because of the precariousness, of course, of acting. And I'm very, very interested in all things medical. I read a lot of doctors' autobiographies and books on the body, etc. So I've always been fascinated in medical things. I'm not the slightest bit, squeamish about medical things, apart from cosmetic surgery, which I cannot watch because I cannot bear people putting themselves through those things with no need. I don't mean people who've been in an accident or a burns or, whatever, or to help them breathe better or whatever, but people who are just doing all of that, and there's enough of it in our business.
Like the Kardashians.
Well, I've got friends that, I've met at school reunions, and, I look at them and, it's just like, what did you do to your lovely face and your lovely smile? And that's their choice. And if it makes them happy, that's great. But that I cannot watch is cosmetic surgery.
What was your favorite episode of the show that you were involved in? Can you recall? Do you have one?
I have two, actually. One was an episode in which I was doing a secondment as a district nurse. And there was a patient, and I think it was one of the episodes that wonderful Miriam Margolyes was in. I'm sure you know Miriam Margolyes, who in fact had been in my first television play as well. She played a district nurse, and I was going round on the rounds with her. In this particular episode, I'm friends with Miriam still today. This particular episode, we were visiting an elderly man who had a serious alcohol problem and couldn't stop. And a huge part of the episode was actually almost like a two-hander play between him and me. And that was unheard of in TV drama, weekly drama in those days. It was just unheard of. So it was a huge dramatic element, which was such a joy to do because it had such levels of growth and journey within the scene. And I remember doing the scene, and we were in the studio. It was series 2 or maybe 3. And he's standing there and I'm standing here and I'm saying, why can't, whatever it was. And he's saying, I can't. And at the end of the scene, it cut. And the whole crew started clapping and the gallery. Now that never happens. Wow. That never happens.
I'll take that now. The bottle, please.
One more for medicinal purposes.
The bottle, Mr. Knight.
I admire your spirit, Miss... But I suggest that you save it for a worthier cause. This one is quite lost.
You've had quite enough. More than enough.
I'll be the judge of that.
You're in no state to judge anything. I'll have the bottle, or
what?
Or I go.
And leave the patient. Tut-tut.
Am I to have it or not?
What would you say to Miss Thing, the hale and hearty Miss Morris?
I tell her the truth.
The going got a bit rough, so out you ran with your tail between your legs, eh?
I tell her I wasn't prepared to stand by and watch while you ruin yourself through alcohol and...
And what?
Self-pity.
So that's how you see me, is it? An indulgent mortal in old boozer?
No. But that's how you see yourself, isn't it? Of course, you could prove me wrong. Giving me the bottle would prove me wrong.
That wouldn't be a challenge, would it?
If you want to call it that.
Well, never let it be said that I didn't accept a challenge. for what it's worth.
But just the strength of not them clapping, which was, of course, was lovely. But that is lovely to know that your peers, you know, the people who see actors acting all the time and are never impressed. It's like techies. They're never impressed. Never. The fact that they, you know, felt touched by it. And it was a very, very powerful episode. So that was one. The other one was an episode with babies, lots of babies. Always loved the babies. It might have been that one, in fact. And there was a friend of mine called Gwyneth Strong who went on to play Cassandra in Only Fools and Horses. But Gwyneth Strong was a lovely actress who I'd worked in with in a play at the Royal Court. And she came in to play a young mum. And there was an older actor called Annie Furbank, who I'd worked with before, playing an older mum. And there was this lovely sort of balance between the old mum who'd had a baby, but was far too busy typing her business on her typewriter in bed to bother, and this young mum who just didn't know how she was going to cope. And it was just a lovely, lovely episode. And of course, it all worked out perfectly in the end, you know, and I think the old mum took the young mum under her wing. I can't remember. But it was just a very nice episode to do, and it had a nice feel to it, you know.
On the show, we've mentioned this before, but your character becomes best friends with Patricia Rutherford, who was played by Fiona Fullerton. And people today might know her as Alice from Alice in Wonderland, Anastasia from Nicholas and Alexandra, or, you know, Bond girl from James Bond. Did you guys develop a friendship offset, and do you keep in touch?
We did develop a friendship. And Fiona, funny enough, although she'd done quite a few big movies, she'd never worked in television before. So she was very new to television, and which was very different, especially in those days. We hadn't moved on to what you sort of rehearse record, which is the way that it's done now, and so much more is done on location now. And so she was very new to it, and I, of course, had already done a lot. So I did sort of take her under my wing, and she does say that, actually. I believe in her book that I took her under my wing. I mean, we were all friends as six. We bonded really well and got on, and nobody had falling out, and we did socialise a lot together. We did a lot of charity work together. But what was funny about Fiona was she was very easy to make laugh. Forgive me, Fiona, I have to tell this story. And there was this one episode where we're filming on the top of a London bus where Patricia is taking Maureen to see the London sights. So it's a very hot summer in the middle of the 70s, and we're on top of this bus, which has been hired specifically. So the only other people on the bus are a few supporting artists, a few extras, and the crew. They're up the front of the bus, and we're sitting here, and I'm looking out the window, and the scene is supposed to start as we go past St. Paul's Cathedral, and then continues as we go around and loop around the City of London, the scripted scene. And the director said, "Érin, why don't you just throw in a bit of ad-lib as you turn from looking at St. Paul's to Patricia, just throw in a bit of ad-lib." So being a bit naughty, I went, "Patricia, I've never seen anything as big as that, have you?" And of course, she just laughed. So we had to drive all the way around the one-way system.
Oh, gosh.
"That's the biggest one I've ever seen." And of course, she laughs. So we have to go all the way around again. And it got to the point that she would be like going around the one-way going, "Please, please don't, please don't." And I would just sort of look at her going. And we did it about 4 times. And then I thought that was enough. The crew were all laughing, absolutely thought it was hilarious. And it got to the point where I just look at her with a little twinkle, and she'd be like, "Don't, please don't, please don't." So I was a bit naughty like that, bit naughty. She forgave me. She forgave me. But I haven't seen Fiona for a long time. I've kept in touch with all the other girls, but I've never known Fiona. When she was on Strictly Come Dancing a few years ago, we talked, the rest of us, about maybe going and seeing it, because Leslie Dunlop is in Emmerdale, which is one of our soap operas. So Leslie said, "Look, you know, if we want to all go, I know they'd love it." And we all thought, shall we? And we were all quite busy at the time, and it just never happened, I'm afraid. But it was good to see her do it. I mean, she moved away from acting, as you probably know.
Yep, and she does real estate now, I think, right?
Yes, she does. She does indeed. So I haven't seen her. She sent me flowers when I came out of hospital after having my babies. I had triplet daughters born 3 months prematurely, and both them and I were on life support machines. So that was a big media thing, and all the 10 o'clock news, all the front page of all the tabloids, all the newspapers. And it was very touch and go for all of us for a long, 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 long time. So when I say I have every respect for nurses, I know what I'm talking about, you know. babies born, you know, the youngest triplets they'd ever saved in the UK at 12 weeks premature, and I was on life support as well. So Fiona sent me flowers when I came out of hospital, but otherwise I've had no contact with her at all.
Oh, well, Fiona, if you're out there watching, I hope you're doing well. We wish you the best.
I think I sent her a message on Twitter, but it might not have been her Twitter feed, because sometimes Twitter feeds, you probably know, are handled by other people, press agents, etc. I think we did send her some good luck things when she was doing Strictly, but she might not have seen them. She might not, and Strictly schedule is pretty heavy anyway, so yeah.
And I would like to take a moment to ask if you could share some memories of some of your other co-stars who are no longer with us. And I actually have a list of people here. Your memories of Faith Brooke, who played Miss Heather Windrup, the head nurse.
Heather was wonderful. She was so elegant, so refined and lovely. And one thing I remember vividly was we were doing a scene, can't remember what it was, and she had a cup and saucer, and the cup was dangling like that. She was shaking. I could see she was shaking. And I said, "Oh, are you nervous, Faith?" And this was maybe series 2, don't remember. But we'd been working with her once. She said, "Oh yes," she says, "it gets worse as you get older." And I remember like it was yesterday. I'm still waiting for it to happen, actually, because I don't suffer from nerves in that way, you know, luckily. That's not to say sometimes you think I better not eat too much before the show goes on tonight because we're very under rehearsed, you know, but I'm, you know, I don't, as I say, very luckily suffer from nerves in that way. But I remember that vividly, and she was just very kind and very lovely. And of course, she'd come from an acting family. And so, you know, she'd seen it all before. She was very kind to us all. She, you know, yeah, she was good. She was good. And beautiful, those cheekbones, just beautiful.
Yes, she kind of reminds me, like when I watch the series myself, she kind of reminds me a little bit of Maggie Smith for some reason. I don't know why. Like, do you see that?
Yes, the same strength, not as acidic,
yes.
But often Maggie Smith, that's the character she plays. Yes, yes.
It's Jean Brody,
strong,
kind of.
Yeah, indeed. No, she was lovely.
Your memories of Ronnie Masterson, who played your mother.
I was terrified of Ronnie. I was terrified of her. Bless her, no longer with us. I think because she'd come from the Irish community in Ireland over to do the scenes and things. And I just felt, and I know there had been some rumblings amongst the other Irish actors in Dublin that there's this girl who's lived a lot of her time in England playing the Irish role, you know, that really surely it should have gone to one of them. And so I always felt slightly scared of her, and she was a powerful woman, but again was lovely. I remember once there was a scene which was set back at home. It wasn't, I can't remember if it was the first scenes, because the first scenes were set at home, and which was filmed, by the way, all the exteriors were filmed in Wales, it was near Tony Pandy. And I remember we stayed in a really weird old hotel that seemed really spooky, that had a chapel in the gardens and things. And the ferry stuff was done at Swansea Ferry. But the interiors obviously were done in studio. And I remember, and we'd always been brought up in my house, like probably yours, to help in the kitchen and prepare vegetables. And she once criticized my peeling of carrots. And I was just after that terrified to do anything. "Have you never peeled a carrot in your life, girl?" I was like, sorry. Bless her, bless her. She probably didn't mean it badly at all, but I was just so in awe of her, in awe, you know. And what you might not know from that one, a lot of people don't know, but there was an episode where I go back home and I meet my boyfriend, who's now with my sister. And my sister in that episode was played by Pauline Quirk. Aha. Oh. There's a little nugget you didn't know.
No, I didn't know that. And she, wasn't she one of the...
She then went in as a regular years later.
Wow.
And I did a Birds of a Feather with her. And I wasn't at the read-through because I was on holiday in Cuba, actually. And apparently she said to the casting director, "Where's Érin?" You know, when I did see her on the first day, it was like, oh, because we hadn't seen each other for a long, long time. You know, and she'd gone on to be in Angels after I'd left. But not many people have picked up the fact that she was the sister that my boyfriend was with, and broke my heart. Yes. Yes.
Back to the actors who are no longer with us. One last one I have. Deborah Makepeace, who played one of the minor roles of student nurse Gail. Do you remember her?
I do remember Deborah. I mean, I think a lot of us young actors knew the other young actors of our sort of same casting. So I knew her from auditions, or when she'd been up for something and I'd been up for it and she got it or I got it, whatever. So I didn't know her well. But I remember coming in, she had a lovely quality to her. I don't remember her very well as a person, but I remember she had a lovely sort of aura, quite a beautiful girl, and a lovely performer, lovely natural authenticity, you'd say nowadays would be what people would say. And I don't remember anything specific, either good or bad, except for that it was all good from what I can remember. But you have to remember, we had people coming in every week, and so not everyone stayed, in the head as much.
Right. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but when the show first aired, there was some criticism that it got from viewers, that it sort of gave this unglamorous depiction of the nursing profession. And could you maybe touch on that a little bit? And because watching it from a modern day perspective, I don't think it was, a very unglamorous depiction.
I don't think it was, well, it wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and certainly real for the time. I mean, if you compared it to things now, you would say, my goodness, that was so soft in terms of what we showed and did and the prosthetics, etc. It's so soft compared to what we see nowadays. But for its time, it didn't make out that all the nurses were pretty and looked always lovely and always, were sparkling, and all the patients were lovely, and the nurses all went off and married a handsome young doctor and lived happily ever after. It wasn't about that. It was about the hard reality of being a nurse and being a student nurse, and the responsibilities and not feeling up to it, and all the stuff you had to learn.
Good morning, Mrs. Ennis. Time to rub your elbows.
What have you done with my sponge bag? It wasn't there this morning.
Was it not? Must be still in the bathroom. Feeling any better?
That's a damn fool question.
Sorry.
Well, how can I feel any better? None of this rubbish they keep pumping into me is doing me any good.
Oh, there now, I'm sure it does.
Are you trying to tell me how I should feel? You stupid girl.
Here we are now. Look what I found. Got put in poor Mrs. Sherman's empty locker.
A likely story.
Beg your pardon. What's the problem?
No problem. I've got my sponge bag back. The girls obviously felt differently about it.
Are you saying Nurse Morahan took it?
Well, of course she took it. When I made a fuss, she got scared and pretended to find it. Empty locker indeed.
It's all right, Pat. Forget it, please.
I won't bloody well forget it.
Don't mind, really.
Oh, you might not, but I do.
What's it got to do with you anyway? I was talking to her.
Mrs. Ennis, you really are the most ungrateful, diabolical old bitch it has ever been my misfortune to meet.
And I remember, there was a lot of, reviews, good and bad, mostly good. And it was huge at the time. I remember that first week, and we still have a TV listings magazine here called the Radio Times. Mm-hmm. And in that first episode, I think there were 11 photographs of me in that first one edition for that first week. I remember my boyfriend at the time was an actor who was very, very nose put out because he, hadn't had anything like that. It didn't last long, that relationship, obviously. But he found, literally there was a picture on the front, there was a picture here, all the way through. It was very big, and we were all quite apprehensive, I suppose, waiting to see the reaction, because it wasn't going to be as sweet as Emergency Ward 10, which had been the previous hospital thing, or General Hospital, which was more of an afternoon hospital thing over here, which was much soapier, if just by nature. It wasn't going to be that, and nor was it meant to be. And I actually felt disappointed when it went on to become more of a soapy two-parter later on. I was disappointed for it and for what we'd started.
And as you said, Angels was such a huge phenomenon when it came out, and it spawned all sorts of merchandise, things like doll play sets from Denny's Fisher, these books that were called annuals, these tie-in novels, and various other things. Did you ever come across any of those items? And if so, what was it like seeing yourself on them?
I mean, it was lovely, but I think we just took it all in our stride, really. I mean, when I think back to it, yes, I have the annuals. I have them downstairs. I have the novels. I have
one too.
yes, indeed. And I have the doll in my loft in a box. I have the doll, the Angels doll, and I have the Angels dressing up outfit in a box in my loft as well. Yes, in fact, I remember them coming to they took the photographs of me for the doll. Not naked, obviously, but and she does have dark hair and blue eyes, you know. And yeah, so I have the doll. I thought it was nice. It was nice, and I've got annuals enough. I tried to get enough from charity shops, thrift shops, as you would know. When I see them, thinking my children will want one each, but none of them shown any interest in them at all. When I go, they'll be left with this pile of angel stuff that they won't know what to do with. They might be able to sell it on eBay or something.
And as we said earlier, the show was known for covering, many topics that were, quite controversial back then, and, were very real and weren't dolled up or, sugar-coated or anything. And things like alcoholism, drug abuse, gender roles, and addiction. Were there any topics that were covered that I guess shocked you or hit you close to home or anything like that?
Not noticeably. No, it's funny to think about the gender things, is that in the episode where we find that Sister Easby, lovely June Watson, who played her, had a female partner, so was a lesbian, we took, I certainly took it in my stride, but it's so funny thinking back to that era when you weren't so aware of people being not straight or not, because so many people kept their sexuality hidden, felt they had to keep their sexuality hidden, which is a terrible thing. When I think back, I was so naive about people I worked with on that show and others who were living with a secret, which they shouldn't have had to keep secret, so even though, it was out being talked about and that, it still wasn't very much not the norm. Obviously there were flamboyant gay men, yes, but not to the extent that people can be open about their sexuality, their fluidity or whatever, as they can nowadays, which can only be a good thing. But, when I look back and I think that episode, and I think about people who worked on that episode who I never knew were gay at the time, and they never would have said it and would have gone along with a persona of being heterosexual and that. And I just think, what a shame. What a shame,
And obviously, one of the things that that I said was the gender roles. Even the gender roles in terms of nursing, I think have obviously changed a lot, because there was one episode called Saturday Night where Julie's character went to a party, and this kind of fascist, kind of old-fashioned sexist guy said to a male nurse,
"They tell me you're studying nursing too."
Right.
Well, I'm afraid I shan't be making for your ward. Joe's much prettier. Tell me, what do they call you?
How do you mean?
Well, the doctors and that. I mean, they can't call you nurse, surely.
Yes, they do.
Oh, they can't.
It's what he is.
You'll be telling me next they put you in black stockings and cap.
Oh, shut up. Take no notice of him, Gordon.
I thought you nurse chaps only work with the nutters anyway.
Did you?
Oh, you love sticking labels on people, don't you? All male nurses are queer and all female ones are nymphomaniacs. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we don't fall into neat little cliche categories.
Just to think that label was put on a man who wanted to be a nurse back then, it's just quite mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, yes. And I remember doing an episode with a wonderful actor called John Deteen, who went on to be in lots of the big dramas here. And I was the nurse in the ward, and I was told that a nurse would be coming to join me on duty. I think it was a night duty, actually. And he turned up, and I was horrified. Maureen was horrified that it was a male nurse, because again, yes, no, that's not for men to be nurses. I've known some wonderful male nurses, and yeah, you've been instrumental in saving my life and my babies, and absolutely, good on you.
Yeah,
it's irrelevant,
Yes. And also not just in terms of gender roles, but even the nurses' uniforms. I mean, these days nurses don't wear, not a lot of nurses that I've seen, hardly any, they don't wear the dresses, they don't wear the caps, the regulations of the uniform have changed so much since then.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in those days, yes, we had to wear the thick black tights. We had to wear the cotton dresses, the starched aprons, the hat and everything. And you couldn't wear your apron outside the hospital, all of those things. And there was a hygiene reason for not wearing your apron outside the hospital. But now, when they're in, most of them are, not all of them, but a lot of them are in scrubs, which is so much more practical and easier. I've worn scrubs a few times in things and thought, my goodness, this would have been easier than those starched things, and always worried you're going to drop something down your apron and get told off by the wardrobe mistress,
Oh, Nurse Regan, do you think you could have another go at pinning your hair up? It does seem to be straggling down a bit. Nurse Rutherford, you do know you're not allowed to wear jewellery. But it's only a signet ring. Nevertheless, would you like to lead the way?
I told you not to wear rings the first day of these classes.
See, you're wearing studs, Nurse.
Oh, I've only just had them done, sister.
Yes, well, don't let number 7 catch you in them. You know her feelings on the matter.
Nurse Rutherford, what was one of the first things we stressed? Attention to appearance, uniform, and so on. You do have a proper pair of shoes.
Well, yes.
Where are they?
They're in my room.
You chose to wear these. Aren't you tall enough, Nurse?
Well, I was late, and these were nearest to hand, and I thought...
You thought anything goes? Well, it doesn't. Not in my classes, Nurse. You should know that by now.
I didn't mean that.
This last tutorial is as important as any other. More so, if anything. These days, nurses are allowed considerable freedom. They're allowed to do all sorts of things, which at one time, if you please, never wear anything like that except when you're off duty. All right, break for lunch, back sharp at 1.
Yeah, nursing's come a long way, and rightly so. And also nurses, I think, and they certainly should be, are generally given a lot more respect than they were. Their qualifications, their knowledge is respected a lot more than it used to be. In the days when the consultant doctor was God and the nurses did everything he said. That's not so much the case. People work in multidisciplinary teams, and everyone's view is important. In fact, this week I'll be doing some communication training with some senior cancer specialist nurses, and they know all about what they're doing, and I will be helping them to deal with the other side of it. It'll be done on Zoom. It's not a face-to-face at the moment. And in those days, nurses weren't given the same respect. I'm sure it still happens, but it's not as bad. And I think also because there are so many more female doctors, and it's a tough one for female doctors. It's still tough, especially surgery and some of those areas, very tough. I have huge respect for them as well.
During the height of the show's popularity, how recognizable did you become, when you were out on the street or just walking casually? Were there times where you guys were mobbed or something like that?
Well, not mobbed walking down the streets, but people would talk to you and stop you all the time. My mother stopped going shopping with me because it just took too long, because I was always being stopped. And that continued for a long old time. But also it's very funny what people think they can say to you. I remember a few of them, of course you only remember the bad things because I find it so funny. One of them somebody coming up and saying, "Oh, you're from that nurses thing, aren't you?" "Yes." "You're the one we don't like." Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
And another one I remember came up to me and said, "Oh, you're from that nurses thing." "Yes, that's right." Said, "You're not nearly as fat as you look on screen."
Oh.
That was another one. And you just it's incredible, what people think that they can say to you. And I've seen it, my husband is an actor and a presenter, and I've seen him get that side of things as well, people saying things to him, but it went on for years and internationally as well. In Europe, we were very, very popular. We had a lot of fan mail, and some of it started to get a little bit dicey. Some of it was getting, because nurses and all of that imagery, the black stockings and all. Yeah. And I remember that there were some letters that we were told to send to the BBC, and they dealt with it. But all of my fan mail went via my agent, and obviously nobody would know my address or anything. And sometimes, I remember getting asked for a piece of hair once, and a few weird things happened. But generally they were all lovely. And no, I don't have any of those letters now. They've all long gone. long gone. But it was nice, and it has been nice actually over the years when people have said they went into nursing because of me, or that they thought it was good. Real people, real nurses, real people doing a real job, as I call it. That has been nice. I look back on it with pride and also gratitude, because it was fantastic fun.
And I think that speaks to the magnitude of how much your show had an impact on not just pop culture, but I think the medical culture as well. And, this is the way I personally feel. I just feel like a lot of times Angels doesn't get a lot of credit, or the credit that it deserves, at least, because I think sometimes it's overshadowed by stuff like Casualty and, various other medical shows. And I just feel like it needs to be out there more, I think, because it was just so groundbreaking for its time.
Well, I think it was, and I wonder if that is because it changed its format to twice weekly, more soapy, after the first 3 seasons, when they took a gap. I wonder if that's what people tend to remember, the soapy element of it. Then I'm not saying it was pure soap, but it certainly became much more so than what we had. And, maybe that's why, maybe that's what's more in people's memory, rather than, what you said, is that it was groundbreaking for its time. And it was serious, and it covered real issues well, and it made people question and protest, etc., and made them watch, which was fantastic. We did a lot of charity work, all of us Angel Girls. We did a lot of charity appearances, huge amounts. And I remember, we used to do one in a big night, a dance hall in centre of London in Leicester Square. And they did, I think, a Thursday night, an NHS or a nurses' cheap night or something. So there'd be like 3,000 nurses who'd go out for a night out, and we would just do a personal appearance there. And they were just so welcoming and so lovely. Nobody threw anything at us. They were all really welcoming. And we did certainly go around the country and do lots and lots of charity work, and that was important to us as well, to do that.
Well, also, during this time of Angels, it was the mid 70s going into, the later 70s. The studio system, like the old-fashioned movie Hollywood studio system in England, or the UK, I should say, had, completely come down and was being dominated more by television. But I still think there were a lot of codes that they followed that were like the old-fashioned movie studio system. Did they ever try to enforce this image on you of being angelic, or telling you to be a certain way when you were in public or being interviewed or something like that?
No, they never did. Interestingly, looking back, when I see how people who are in a big drama like that today, the way that their life is under a microscope, a telescope the whole time, how you get pictures of their cellulite on holiday on the front of a magazine and things, or, if their teenage son has got drunk at a party or something, all of that exploitation of delving into people's real lives didn't really happen. I had a very good communication and relationship with the main media in the UK, right across the UK. And that showed when I had my premature triplets, the sort of response that the media gave me. But they didn't ever try and find any dirt at all. There was no looking for dirt. We were normal young women. We were out partying and doing what, but nobody was doing anything. Certainly I can't remember anyone doing anything really exciting or anything slightly illegal, at all. I do remember we once took some hot chocolate sachets from the set, we were allowed to, and put them in the teas making thing in the hotel we were staying in to make hot chocolate in the hotel room, and it puffed chocolate powder over the hotel wall. I remember that, but that's about as wild as it got, because, we partied, of course we partied, but also we were working very hard. But there was nobody tried to tell us to be something we weren't. But maybe they'd given us, they probably did give us some guidance on the press and things like that. I remember there was one particular journalist who worked for one of the tabloids, who was notorious at taking people out for lunch and piling alcohol into them and then getting them to spill their beans. He was notorious. And I do remember going out to lunch with him. And I used to drink in those days. I don't drink now. And I certainly wouldn't have drunk much anyway at that. And I was very, very careful, you know, not that I think there would have been much dirt for him to get, but I still know him today, you know, him and his wife and daughter. So it's funny how these things come about. But, you know, I think if any of us had been in serious problems, perhaps with substance abuse or something that would have been bad for the show, I think they would probably have pulled us up on it. But I don't remember anything like that happening. They, as I say, after some of the post came that was, you know, not nice, some of the slightly weird post was coming, then we were told to send that, you know. But apart from that, I don't remember them ever sort of trying to put any sort of pressure on us to be anything we weren't.
Yeah, because which I think is a good thing because, you know, like I said, like the old-fashioned Hollywood studio system had collapsed during this time. But even as late as the early 1970s, you know, I've heard stories from, you know, Olivia Hussey when she was Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. They tried to enforce this image of like, you know, Juliet upon her and, you know, be like Juliet when you're in public. And even someone like Hayley Mills, when she came off of Disney, you know, when she was working as an adult and trying to move into more mature roles, I think they still even tried to instill that kind of wholesome girl next door image upon her.
Yes. I think maybe we were lucky that we were all, you know, not doing anything. None of us were doing anything that they were particularly worried about. But it certainly didn't feel like that. I mean, to us, we were just hardworking young actors doing a great job. And I don't think it's till later you look back and see how big that was perhaps in my career. You know, I mean, did I peak too soon, you could say? You know, I've gone on to raise a huge family and I'm still acting today. So, you know, I haven't had to take a day job for over 40 years since, you know, I was at school. So I do okay, but it's certainly not to the same recognizable level. Would I want that today? Not particularly. Would I turn it down? No. So, you know, I don't sit here saying, I wish I was back being recognized all the time. I really don't. And I've been grateful that my family have been able to be a family growing up without a sort of a microscope on them, as it were, as you see does happen to people. It's a huge strain on people, I think, you know, huge strain, the imposition today, you know. So, yeah, it's a weird thing. But I think, as I say, the media have changed a lot and their methods have changed.
Yes, especially with, you know, the presence of social media and all of these like, you know, gossip columnists and like, you know, all these exploit tabloids and stuff. I definitely think it's changed a lot.
Yes, it certainly has. Yeah.
And how would you feel if, since Angels was so prevalent and so popular during its time and had such a major impact on British culture and major cultures, I should say, how would you feel if they rebooted the show with a whole new set of modern characters in the same setting of St. Angela's Hospital?
I think it would be interesting. It would have to be a very different format today because nursing is done as a very different way. You know, it's a university degree, as it were. I work a lot with student doctors and nurses in training them with communication skills and soft skills. So I mix in that world. I think it would be very interesting. I'd be interested, but I'd also probably be a little bit like, oh, don't mess with it. Don't mess with it. I mean, unless, of course, they put me in as matron, which would be fine. You know, that would be absolutely fine. Claire Clifford, who I think you've interviewed. Have you interviewed Claire?
Not yet. We've talked about it, but I've communicated with her and we do have plans to interview at some point.
Claire, Julie, myself, and Karen got together about 4 years ago for a meal. And then we've met a few times, actually. Leslie's always been up in Yorkshire, so never managed it. And as I say, we don't have any contact with Fiona. And we then went to, Karen didn't go because her husband was dying or had just died at the time, I can't remember. But Claire and I went to Julie Dorncole's big birthday party about 2 years ago. So we keep in touch. We see each other. We went to see Claire do something, and I bumped into her at castings, and you know that's very nice. But we joked about it being set in a nursing home, and these old nurses are running this nursing home, and maybe, you know, Sister Easby, who's still alive, June Watson, is still working. Fantastic actor. She was at the National only earlier, last year before lockdown. We could be playing one of the old ladies. We sort of toyed with this fantasy about this, being in this old people's home.
Yeah, I would love it. I would love it if the show was rebooted, and I'd love to see them bring back, many of the original ones who were on the show and set the bar and set it all together, and have you guys playing the ones who are teaching the new generation. That's how
we would be, or we'd be retiring now. I mean, that's the reality. We'd be retiring now. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, it's a weird old thing. I mean, quite often when I talk about things, if I'm sending my CV to a casting director or a director, if they're anything under 45, I know they won't have heard of Angels unless their parents used to watch it or they watched it on the reruns. They just won't have any idea of it or the strength of it at all, which is a shame, but that's just the way life goes. My husband was in Doctor Who, and so he does a lot of Doctor Who things. And that's a whole different thing because that cult continues forever and ever and ever.
Oh, yes.
And when I met him, which was a couple of years after I'd finished Angels, he'd never seen it because he was working predominantly in theatre at the time. So we met in a rehearsal room of a TV play in which I was playing the Irish nurse and he was the anaesthetist. And if he was here, he'd say, he's been putting me to sleep ever since. Boom, boom. Which is 42 years ago next month.
Oh, gosh. Happy almost anniversary.
Well, thank you. We had our Ruby wedding in August, just gone, in lockdown, semi-lockdown. So he had no idea about Angels. But at that time I was still being recognised in all sorts of places. So it was quite interesting because he had none of this, oh, she's from that. And obviously he's just a working actor as well. So we know how it goes, it swings and roundabouts, and I've had this amazing career and still am having. I mean, when lockdown happened, I was due to be, my husband was on tour in a big production of Sound of Music. And then I was going off to do a play about Errol Flynn playing his mother. And then we were going to do a play together touring. And then I was due to do a feature film. All of that, of course, gone, absolutely gone, with lockdown. Some of it may happen, some of it will happen, but who knows when. But we've got raised 5 lovely children. We've just had our 9th grandchild born in November. And, so we have a lot of wealth in our life, a lot of wealth and memories, of course.
That's so good. I love to hear that. I just love to hear those types of stories about actors who, find happiness after so much success, because it's too often we hear about people who, had fame, fortune, wealth, and then all of a sudden some sort of unfortunate event happened and they lost it all. But it's always good to hear about, the stories of actors who, had, all that wonderful stuff, but still managed to live a normal life. So that's very inspiring.
Yes, and I was up in Glasgow doing a Bollywood feature film just before Christmas with Akshay Kumar, and I filmed a commercial a few weeks ago just before Christmas, and I'm doing a web series at the moment. So we continue to work, and one thing that's interesting is I think it's because. Sorry, I'm just going to stop my daughter for a minute.
It's all right. Thank you.
She probably wants to moan about the baby crying. Sorry about that. I think because I started so young, and I think it was true of many of us who started very young, as Julie did, as Karen David did, and as Leslie did. Claire was a little bit later, and Fiona started young, is that because we went to schools where the other kids were acting as well. In our school were the kids who were the lead in Oliver with, the big movie. I spent 5 months on the film Scrooge with Albert Finney, and all the dancing scenes along with loads of other kids, we were just working kids, working acting kids. And I don't think, maybe some had, but certainly I never had this aim to be famous. I just wanted to carry on working and enjoying it. And that's pretty much what I've done. The fame thing, I'm glad it happened when it did. I'm glad it happened in that time of culture when it did, so it wasn't so intrusive. They weren't seeing who I was dating or not dating at the time, because that's difficult enough for young people without all of that stuff on top of it. I'm glad it happened when it did, and I'm so glad I've carried on and had maybe 5 children is a bit excessive, but had the family and continue to have the family and a good good marriage and a good career to keep working in a job that we love. And, you know, my husband and I do quite a lot of theatre together, and we laugh from morning till night. I mean, it's not a bad way to earn a living, is it?
Not at all. Not at all.
And we work with people again and again, which shows that obviously they're happy with our work and we get to know them. We're very lucky. We do a little bit of summer theatre, and we're at the seaside having fish and chips and ice cream. And, you know, and some of those you even help paint the sets and sort the costumes. And it's just all, it's a lot of fun as well. You know, it's a blessing, really. It's a blessing.
That's so sweet. Well, I know we're running a bit overtime here, so I have one more question for you before we sign off. When you look back on your career and all the, you know, wonderful things and, like, you know, all the accomplishments that you've had, what does Angels mean to you?
It means a lot career-wise, because I was the lead in something for that long that was so popular. It means a lot to me in terms of developing a character over a long time and getting to know instinctively, learning about instincts. You know, I've always been quite an intuitive actor. Learning instinctively about a character rather than having to particularly dissect something. It taught me a huge amount about the technicalities of working in television. I mean, I remember, you know, I could, and even now know exactly where to be for a shot, even if it's just that tiny bit, you know, if there's other faces, just that tiny bit, all of those technical things that I learnt on the job, as it were. Yeah, I mean, good. It stands for a lot in my life. Was it the pinnacle? No. I would say the pinnacle in my life is probably my family, really, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's probably right. And I've been lucky because so many actors haven't had the big success, or the family, so many actors. And I always say to young actors, don't forget to have a life, whatever that is, be it travel, be it get a dog, be it train chimpanzees, write, learn languages, or, you know, if having a family, don't keep putting it off, because I see them, they're getting to 40 and, you know, they haven't had the big success they were waiting for, rather than enjoying all the other little jobs along the way. Mm-hmm. And they haven't had the big success and they haven't had children, and they're like, oh my God, everything is slipping past me, you know. And it's, you know, I see the desperation and I just think that's so sad. I'm not saying every young actor ought to go off and have babies. I'm really not. But, you know, just don't forget to have a life is my thing for anyone starting out in any career, really. You know, it's finding the balance. And I've been lucky that balance happened, rather than any wonderful thing that I managed to do to make it happen. It's just the way it worked out, a lot of it. You know, there were many times when I was at home with the 5 children, including the triplets, you know, up to my elbows in nappies, when I had to turn down jobs that I would have loved to have done, that I wasn't able to go and ever repeat. But, you know, that is life. And, you know, you can't sit and, you know, weeping about it. Was I resentful? Too right I was. Was I angry and disappointed? Too right I was. Do I regret it? No.